Hi, this is Kelly, a counselor here at ND PERS, and today we are going to be discussing all of the aspects of returning to work after you have started collecting retirement. The first question to ask yourself once you've made the decision of returning to work is, am I returning to work with a private employer, meaning any business, city, any affiliation or group that does not have North Dakota Public Employees Retirement System as its retirement plan? Or am I returning to work with a ND PERS employer? As you can see on the screen here, there are several things that can be impacted if you do return as a retiree to another ND PERS employer, and we'll explore those options in this video. If your answer is you are returning to work with a private employer, that is, any employer that does not use ND PERS as a retirement plan, I have some great news for you. Returning to work with a private employer has no impact on collecting your ND PERS pension or receiving any insurances through ND PERS. If your answer is that you are returning to work with a participating ND PERS employer, you'll want to do your homework, and that's what this video is here to help you to do. Your decision to return to work could impact whether or not you can collect your ND PERS retirement pension, when your health insurance coverage will end, and so forth. So you will want to plan accordingly. Each member is responsible for understanding what your retirement plan provisions are and what could happen if you return to work. These are the questions you'll want to ask yourself before signing any return to work agreements or verbally agreeing to return to work with another ND PERS employer. Your answers to these 4 questions below could determine whether or not you are even eligible to retire, whether or not you can continue receiving your pension and return to work, and what type of benefits you might be eligible for or not eligible for, depending on the answers to these questions. The first one, who is your new employer? Basically, you'll want to know, is this a new employer to you or the same employer that you are currently retired from? The second question, what kind of position is this? You'll need to know the position status and whether or not they're eligible for retirement. Temporary position, whether it's a part-time position, seasonal, or if it's a full-time mandatory contributing position. The third question, what ND PERS retirement plan is this position eligible for? And the fourth question you'll need an answer to, will there be a bona fide break in service? The answers to these questions we will discuss in the next upcoming slides. Let's start with question number 1. Who is your new ND PERS employer? If it's any state agency, regardless of which state agency employs you, any agency within the state of North Dakota is considered one participating ND PERS employer. So this includes higher education. If you are going to work at NDSU and you have retired from the North Dakota Department of Transportation, you are still going to the same employer because they are both state agencies. However, if you are going to a political subdivision, such as a county, city, or school, each one of these is considered separate participating ND PERS employers. The second question you'll need an answer to is, what kind of position is this? You'll need to know, what status are you being rehired for? Is it a full-time mandatory participation status? If it is a regularly funded permanent position where you're working more than 20 hours a week for more than 20 weeks a year, it is considered a full-time mandatory participation position. If it is part-time, this would be optional participation. Part-time is regularly funded, permanent, and working less than 20 hours per week. Temporary is also an optional participation. Temporary is limited duration or seasonal and working less than 20 weeks per year. The third question to ask yourself is, what ND-PERS retirement plan is this position eligible for, if any? If you are returning to work in any of these retirement plans that fall under the North Dakota Century Code 54-52, this is most of your main retirement plans. Most of you are on either one of the three tiers of the main plan, the judge's plan, one of the public safety plans, which includes the National Guard and the BCI plans, or the defined contribution retirement plans. Anyone on these plans needs to follow the same guidelines and rules for whether or not you would be able to participate. An exception would be for anyone that is under the Highway Patrol Retirement Plan. They are under the North Dakota Century Code 39-03. If you are a retired Highway Patrol member, you may participate in any of the plans above and continue to draw your Highway Patrol retirement plan when you return to work with a different employing agency, if it is different than the Highway Patrol. So if you are on the Highway Patrol and receiving the Highway Patrol pension, you could return to work for an employer that uses the public safety plan or the main plan and continue receiving that pension while participating in the retirement plan for public safety or the main plan. The last question you'll want to ask yourself is, will there be a bona fide break in service? For IRS qualified retirement plans, a bona fide separation means a genuine break in employment, meaning that you as the employee have no intent, no prearranged agreements, anything verbal or written, nothing that states or has made the intention that you will return to work after the date of termination. This includes any type of position to the same employer, whether it's a temporary, part-time, as an independent contractor, even as a board member, an elected official, or a volunteer. Any type of service to the same employer, there cannot be any type of intent to return to work. Under the NDAC-71-02-01, we define the termination of employment for the purpose of benefit eligibility. It's defined as a severance of employment by not being on the payroll of a covered employer for a minimum of 31 days from the last day you worked or the last paycheck, whichever is later. As an example on this, maybe your last day of work was July 31st, and your check is in August 1st, for example. You would need to wait 31 days after that August 1st check before you could return to work to have that bona fide break in service. But remember, you can't have any prearranged agreements, anything verbal or written to return to work after that date of termination. Now, here's where things can get a little sticky and there's a lot of different variables. So we will cover a few possible scenarios here. If you choose to restart contributions into one of the ND-PERS retirement plans, so if you are under North Dakota Century Code 54-52 and you restart contributions into one of those retirement plans, you cannot continue to draw monthly benefits. So your pension payments would be suspended and you would restart contributions, meaning that you would need to retire a second time from not one, but two retirement plans, and we'll talk more about that later. Secondly, if you are an early retiree, there are a couple of additional things that early retirees must adhere to. First of all early retirees must be off of covered payroll for a minimum of 31 days from the last day worked or from their last paycheck received, whichever is later, to maintain their monthly pension benefit eligibility. Also, early retirees cannot return to a position requiring mandatory participation. Next scenario is retirees who are under age 59 and a half. If you are a normal retiree on your ND PERS plan and you are in your early 50s without a bona fide separation from service of at least 31 days, so if you're under age 59 and a half and haven't had a bona fide separation of employment, you would be subject to a 10% early withdrawal IRS penalty on any pension payments you have received before age 59 and a half. Normal retirees under age 59 and a half will be required to submit an SFN 62620. So anyone who is under age 59 and a half and is retiring as a normal retiree will need to complete this form just to let our benefit payments team know if you have any intentions of returning to work. Lastly, there are some special provisions that apply to the Highway Patrol Retirement Plan under North Dakota Century Code 39-03.1 and North Dakota AC 71-05. So for those Highway Patrol folks, you can, retire from your Highway Patrol, collect your pension, and restart contributions into an ND PERS retirement plan. So there are some special provisions that do apply to those Highway Patrol members. Next, we are going to discuss 3 options which allow you to return to work and to keep drawing your ND PERS retirement pension. If you return to work with the same employer, you have a couple of options to be able to keep collecting your retirement pension. Option number 1 is to return to work as a non-contributing temporary employee. In this temporary employee status, you can work as many hours as you want to or that are required. You just need to be non-contributing. Option number 2, you can return as a non-contributing permanent part-time employee. Working in this permanent part-time status, you must be working less than 20 hours a week. For both of these non-contributing options, you do need to decline and waive participation with the employer by submitting the SFN 17627. It's an optional participation waiver that is found in the new hire form packet. A special note here is if you are early retiree or if you're a normal retiree under age 59 and a half, any of those other restrictions that we mentioned, those types of situations would and rules would still apply here. Okay, so we've taken a look at the optional participation job statuses where you could return to work as a temporary employee or as a permanent part-time employee. What happens if your return to work offer is with a mandatory participation employment rule? So if you've got a full-time position that would require mandatory participation, maybe it's a part-time permanent position over 20 hours a week, any of those types of statuses that would require mandatory participation. North Dakota Century Code 54-52-05 addresses normal retirees that meet that mandatory participation rule. If your new employer is going to be a different employer than the one in which you retired from, you must waive future participation in that retirement plan within the first month of employment. So you've got to move fairly quickly and contact ND PERS to speak to your ND PERS retirement counselor. We would get you the SFN 54286. That form is going to allow you to return to work with a different employer. It's a special waiver that only ND PERS counselors can print you, and you'll need to do that right away because we need that on file within your first month of employment. Otherwise, you would risk having your pension suspended and you would have to contribute. The second option is what if your retirement offer is with the same participating employer? Maybe you retired from the state and you are going to work for the same state office in a mandatory participation position, or maybe it's even a different state office, and now you are wanting to return to work to a mandatory participation status. If you are a retiree and appointed to a state position, you may not participate in the retirement plan, but you must keep your retirement status. So if you are appointed by the governor or another state official, you may not participate in the retirement plan. You must continue your retirement status. This would only apply to state employees appointed by an elected state official to an unclassified state position. So for as long as you were returning to work that way until that successor is appointed. There is a special waiver form from ND PERS. It's an ineligible appointed official verification. There are a couple of other notes here on these special return to work provisions. If you are a normal retiree under age 59 and a half, if you don't have that bona fide separation from service for at least 31 days, you may be subject to a 10% early withdrawal IRS penalty on any pension payments received until you reach age 59 and a half. Let's take a look at what happens if you don't have an option to waive participation when you return to work. In some cases, such as the ones below, your employer or the position type mandates that you must participate. In those cases, your pension that you are receiving would be suspended until the time when you retire a second time from that new position that you are returning to work to. In this case, if you are a normal retiree returning to work with the same ND PERS participating employer, you would be required to contribute to the ND PERS system as a permanent full-time employee. So if you are hired as a permanent mandatory contributing full-time employee and going back to the same employer that you just retired from, you would have your pension suspended and need to retire a second time. Now, this is unless you are under those exceptions that we just looked at under the North Dakota Century Code 54-52-05. So for most of you, if you are returning to work with the same employer in a permanent full-time mandatory contributing status, your pension would be suspended. This includes any members drawing their pension from one of the main tiers, a judge's plan, public safety, National Guard, BCI law enforcement, or the defined contribution plan, because we are all under the same North Dakota Century Code 54-52. If you are a Highway Patrol normal retiree, however, this would be an exception. Highway Patrol is under a different century code as we discussed earlier. So for those normal retirees, they could return to work for a different participating employer and be able to continue receiving their pension. Now for early retirees, if you return to work with any ND PERS participating employer in any capacity, so whether it's temporary, part-time, full-time status, board member, any type of status at all, before having a bona fide separation of employment of at least 31 days or more, then your pension would be suspended. Also, if you are an early retiree and you return to work as a permanent full-time employee at any time in the future, your early retirement benefits would be suspended. Next, let's take a look at how returning to work can affect your health insurance coverage. So what happens to your ND PERS health insurance when you return to work? Let's take a look at a couple of examples depending on whether or not you take a 31-day break from your termination date and when you return to work. In our first example, you leave work in March of 2025. That's when you terminate employment or retire. In April of 2025 is your ND PERS retirement date, your last check, and also your health insurance coverage would end at the end of April. So you would need insurance to start in May of 2025 if you took that 31-day break in insurance. With that, you would not be returning to work until at least May 1st of 2025. So as long as you're taking that 31-day break between your last day of employment and when you return to work, you would get that additional month, that whole month of April, as insurance for health insurance as a state of North Dakota employee. In our second example, you are not taking any break before returning to work. So maybe your employer says, nope, I need you right away in April, or I need you, right away yet in March, a few days after you retire. However it works, if you are not taking that 31-day minimum break and leaving in March of 2025, your NG PERS health insurance would end March 30th of 2025 because you've had that April return to work date, which is not the 31 days without that 31-day minimum break. Now, if your employer decides to offer you health care coverage or to pay for that, they certainly can, but that is between you and the employer. You would not automatically get that additional month as a state employee if you do not take that 31-day break in service. So what do you do when you are really ready to retire? Perhaps you've returned to work for another 1, 2, 5 years, and now you are ready to retire a second time. Here are the steps you'll need to take in order to make that happen. The first action you'll want to do is to make an application to resume your suspended retirement payments. The second step is the original retirement and second retirement will be calculated separately for you. The third step is that you must elect the same retirement option upon the second retirement as that you originally chose in your first retirement. For example, you had initially retired after 30 years of employment and you selected the 100% joint and survivor option for your original retirement. In this example, you must also select the 100% joint and survivor for your second retirement benefit. You would not be able to change that to a 50% or to a 20-year term certain or something. It needs to be the same retirement option as that you had originally chosen. In this video, we've tried to go through most of the return to work scenarios, but things are constantly evolving and changing with both state legislation and federal legislation, as well as just different unique scenarios that you might be subject to. Please feel free to give us a call if you've got some questions that weren't addressed in this video, or if you still have some concerns about your return to work process. Our phone number to reach a retirement counselor is 701-328-3900, or you can call us toll free at 1-800-803-7377. We do have additional online resources on our ND PERS website. Just go to ndpers.nd.gov and you can search return to work for a lot of additional information. And lastly, our member self-service. You can log into your member self-service and request an appointment with your retirement counselor, and we would be happy to discuss any return to work issues or questions that you might have. You can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. And I thank you very much for watching this return to work presentation. Hopefully it's answered your questions, and we wish you the best in your second career. Thank you.